Welcome to the Ambitious Coach Podcast, powered by 90. I'm your host, Cam Lawson. Each week, we explore the real tactics, tough conversations, and breakthrough moments that drive coaching success. Well, hey, we've got Jonathan B. Smith, JBS for short. I think that's what everyone knows you as, but Expert EOS Implementer. Absolute legend in the community. That was one of the first things when I joined the team here at 90. It was, got to talk to JBS, got to talk to JBS. And so just a legend, and you're a negotiator training with the Black Swan Group, a pilot, a dog trainer, a fisherman, copying that off your LinkedIn. I think you may be one of the coolest people and most interesting people that I probably have in my contact. So really excited to dive into this. So welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Cam. That's quite an introduction.
Well, I won't take much credit from it. Just read off the LinkedIn bio, but fascinated to dive in and just learn a little bit more about how you have grown and scaled your practice. So we're going to dive into a couple of the core competencies of what we believe takes to build a coaching practice, which is mastery. We're going to understand what that means to you, and then really dive into also your offering and how you've differentiated yourself through a variety of things. But to kick it off, tell us a little bit about your journey to getting to where you're at to today.
Well, I identify first as an entrepreneur and then second as an EOS implementer and negotiator. But my mindset is entrepreneur. So I met Gino, I think maybe Gino Wickman, from founder of EOS in 2002 at a EO party in Detroit. And I'm like, I got to go meet that guy. What's he got going on? So we ended up being his second client, my brother Tyler and I, who's also an implementer at this point, and was running a entrepreneurial business at that point. We had a floating security barrier that stopped a waterborne IED attack. So that's a mouthful, but ended up building an Inc. 500 business. I called it a mini multinational. Spent a lot of time in the Middle East, and then in 2013 decided I didn't want to be on those long haul flights. And my brother Tyler was a CIO at EOS at the time, and he said, "Peyton's doing really well. You should really think about doing this." So that's when I actually became an EOS implementer. It started my coaching journey.
Very cool. So one of Gino's OG clients. That's a unique differentiating point. But you also have a book. Actually, we were just joking before we started. I got it last night, and I was able to read it before this conversation. But you talk a lot in that. There's this three ideas and concepts that you believe every entrepreneur should have. So a business operating system, a peer network, and a coach. You believe all three of those are critical to the success. And since this show is really geared towards business coaches building and scaling their practice, can you talk to what that means within the context of a business coach and how you've utilized that to grow and scale your practice with those three specific rings or whatever you want to call it?
I had been in Abu Dhabi prior to coming back in 2013, and I was working for the royals. So the gentleman who I was working for, His Highness, Royal Highness, is now the ruler of the UAE, Sheikh Mohammed. I came back and I couldn't get a meeting with a Vistage chair. So I decided that I had seen a bunch of clients who'd done really well. I had a bunch of clients who had done really well like a year into the practice, and they had done well by doing really two things: having an operating system. In my case, it was EOS. And then many of them were either in Vistage, where they have a coach as a Vistage chair, and then they're in a group that's their peer group, or they were in YPO and they had other coaches, or they were in the entrepreneurs organization and they had other coaches. And so what I decided to do was I kept having these conversations with Vistage chairs who thought maybe we were competing for the same budget line. And I wanted to lay out a framework that said, I actually think it's complementary. I think we do different work, but the work itself complements each other. So that's how I created the Optimize for Growth framework. And that's why we wrote the book. And it's still relevant today.
So as a coach, we alluded to this a little bit before, but mastery is something that we believe is critical to be able to go into a competitive space. There are lots of business coaches out there, so being able to go in and build out skill sets that you're going to be able to go in and improve how you operate as a coach. Can you talk a little bit about just what mastery means to you as you have grown and scaled your practice?
Sure. I like the concept of the path to mastery. There's a Japanese concept called shu-ha-ri. And with shu-ha-ri, they use it in agile as a framework. And shu means you are literally just following what they told you. So I used to start my EOS session and I'd be like, I have my playbook here, and I just walk through it with
Hmm.
a piece of paper on a clipboard. And at one point, my client says, "You know it well enough. You don't need to pull the clipboard out anymore. Put it away." So I never pulled the clipboard out again. So that was when I started moving to Ha.
Hmm.
So Ha is when you start to make it your own a bit, so you can riff and be a little bit personal about how you go deliver it. And then from there, Re is where literally I could do it in any direction. So we are always objective driven, not agenda driven. I actually say I do EOS freestyle as opposed to EOS pure. And that means I'm going to show up and meet the client where they're at. And you can't take a client where they don't want to go. So if there's some issue the client's having and I'm going, no, but we're an hour two and we're supposed to be here, that's not going to be helpful to the client. The client wants to be heard. And so, as part of that process, I think 70% of making EOS work is being able to facilitate team health and hard conversations, what we call them sensitive conversations with the Black Swan Group.
There is an art to. I have been through an EOS implementation from a leadership team standpoint. And there really is an art to a business coach being able to go in and understand that dynamic of, okay, I have this agenda that I'm running through, but I'm also in a room full of humans who are bringing all sorts of emotional, personal and professional aspects in, and then the coach has to be able to navigate that and understand when to interject, when to let them run through the course of emotions, because I think there is some aspect of being healthy where you're running through just getting deep with one another and getting to the root of that issue. How have you as a coach figured out how to navigate that fine line of when to enter the Chris Snyder calls it entering the danger of, all right, looks like somebody got offended based on what they said. How have you fine-tuned that skill over the years?
It's helpful to have 1,500 sessions under my belt to start. In 2015, I hired Dino Signore, who was actually has a PhD in organizational development, to be my coach. So he taught me the academic elements of facilitation, because facilitation to me was like, okay, I'm going to run a meeting.
Hmm.
Well, there's a lot more to facilitation than just running a meeting. So I realized that I was actually a mental health worker. Like as EOS implementers, we are mental health workers of sorts because people wait to show up and drop whatever they're going to drop in an EOS session. So I've basically committed myself to becoming a better facilitator, being clearer at EQ. So I have Mary Pat Knight, who's my EQ coach. And then I also learned the hostage negotiation techniques with Chris Voss. Interestingly, they're all very similar in terms of how they work with different labels for what they're called. So Mary Pat more comes more from the heart, and Chris comes more from a tactical empathy standpoint, and Dino comes from an academic standpoint, saying, here's where the team might be at. But my commitment to team health, like I bought Patrick Lencioni's whole series early on, and then just for the last 10 years, I've been working on getting better and being present in those conversations.
It's fascinating you mentioned that because I from the outside you would look in at someone that has had a lot of success in their coaching organization and tons of sessions under your belt, but you also have tapped into not just one coach, but actually pursuing different frameworks that are going to level you up. And I think that goes directly into what you talk about in your book, which is you get that coach that's gonna help you see your blind spots, help you level up. And so I think that's important for other coaches because I would argue, and maybe you would agree with this, that that's probably led to a lot of the success that you've had is diversifying your skill sets, that it's not just one single lane that I'm playing in. I think you called it a purist type thing, but just basically checking boxes off of the agenda, if you will. But you're going in and having a tool set that you may not use in every single session, but when it comes up, you have that ability to tap into that tactical empathy. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, with the Black Swan Group, we say situation drives tactics.
Hmm.
And so what ends up happening is if I don't understand, someone can't explain to me how their business works. This is why I say I'm an entrepreneur first. We've got a problem because I'm like, they can't explain it to me. How are they going to explain it to the rest of their team? How are they going to explain it to the world in marketing or to their vendors, et cetera? And so what ends up happening is I show up in session and I'm just not sure what's going to show up. So the situation drives tactics is really key. And I think there's like two different kinds of implementers. There's a page turner. You can hire someone to walk you through the binder and turn the page and say, "Oh, but we're on page 3 right now. This is where we're supposed to be at this part of the day." Or you can walk in and have someone who my clients call me the 12th man on the team. So Texas A&M has a 12th man. The 12th man sits in the stands the entire time during the game, and is willing to jump on the field if and when needed. But generally, I don't jump on the field, but I'm there to take a call on a Saturday when we're going to fire the CFO on Monday, and we need a team to fix that. So
Yeah.
that's the role I like to play.
That's fascinating. And you have also embraced a an approach of lots of different technologies, even AI, into how you manage your practice, and you've become, I would call it, a master in that as well. How have you integrated some technology into how you work as a business coach to level up and really even drive a better client experience?
I think technology is a force multiplier. It puts me in a position where, like, what I really want to do is go help solve problems. But in order to do that, we've got to get the framework in place to start. So, for example, with 90.io, I have my clients in 90 before focus day. And then at lunch, I'm actually entering the accountability chart that we created so that because I find that people just don't do the homework. Most teams don't do the homework. So we run the session in 90.io. I have two screens in my office, one 85-inch and one 65-inch. So people don't have to turn their heads around. It has actually just a mirrored screen. So I find that 90 encourages compliance. Because if we can get the compliance, then we can do the hard work to, because now people know how to compartmentalize and prioritize issues, for example, and it's just easier to use software like that. I also use, you mentioned I have a product called Flip Deck. Flip Deck, literally, I'll be in a session and my to dos following a session, I actually put them in Flip Deck with the resources that people should consider. If I'm in a warm call and people say, "What should I see before the 90 or share with the team?" I have an EOS intro doc. I have like 100 different flip decks that I can share with my clients. So instead of sending an email and have to customizing it, I just I basically use a bit.ly link that's a custom URL and send it to people. And then from an AI perspective, what I was finding, one example is with the core value speech. People were not actually writing the core value speech very well. So I built a GPT inside of ChatGPT that takes the core values that they created and then writes a speech that usually is about 70% right. And the results have been much more powerful coming into vision building day number 2 when people have at least something to edit as opposed to having to start from scratch. And it ends up looking like exactly what looks on page 8, like the EOS core value speech.
Yeah. That's so interesting because I remember You said something about how you were able to enter in, and I asked you to talk about 90s. That's great. I appreciate that. But it fits right into your how you run your sessions and into your client experience. And it's the implementer that we used followed a very similar format for how he did that. And he actually talked about how in his post-session work, that cut down so much of the work because he was able to enter those in. When we had accountability chart finalized after focus day, the rocks finalized, they were already entered in, and I think that's such a gap a lot of times is what happens after the session. Most clients, I mean, if they don't have a structure that's put into place, it gets very difficult to understand, "Okay, now what? I had this conceptual knowledge that I just got imparted on, and now I need to go actually do that work." And so having that structure, I think from a coach standpoint is so helpful because then it gives them the path to succeeding and going into, and then having other ways from even more of your preliminary conversations before you get into session of some of that built out and utilizing technology. That's just a great way to simplify things to make it easier for you because I think there's so much custom things that go in, and when you have to customize an email and send that to a client, you already have pre-built things through Flipdeck and some of these other tools that makes things just so much easier.
Yeah, and avoids decision fatigue, right? So I've already made the decision. It also makes me like if we're in a warm call and someone asks a question and they say, "Well, we're contemplating an M&A transaction," I can send something to them on about M&A, and within 5 seconds, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this guy follows through and does his to dos." So, as an example, or my preference is really to get the. Our job is to get people what they want from their business, not to be the EOS police. So ultimately, I think purity inside of EOS is getting people what they want from their business and getting them the life that they want. So if technology is going to help us do that, there are very few integrators who are strong enough or have the time and aren't hitting the ceiling when they start EOS that are going to do as good of a job as we could with some technology where it's like a system of record already put together that will help a client just accelerate their EOS implementation. And one of the interesting things is that some implementers think that accelerates the client through the process and they might graduate early. And I say, great, graduate early. I hope it works better for you. Great work begets more great work. That's how I get referrals. That's how you scale the business by doing great work.
You've talked a little bit about the importance of a peer network. Can you talk a little bit about you have the I think it's the infamous the Honey Badgers group, but can you talk a little bit about how that came into to being and also the value of having that peer network as a business coach?
Well, it's pretty lonely to be a business coach by yourself out there. And what I found was so the peer network we call, or academically, it's called a community of practice. So there's this concept of a community of practice. I had been in EO for 12 years and just had a great experience as an entrepreneur having an EO forum that I was a part of. And so as I started to scale my practice, the newer folks, I wasn't necessarily as interested in some of the things they were talking about. And the more advanced folks, maybe what I was talking about was less relevant. So I decided to build a community of practice. We called it the Honey Badgers. I took the 12 top EOS implementers at the time and said, okay, and I created a Honey Badger creed and said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the following things: practice management, business development, trouble in the session room. We're going to support each other along the way. And so we built this Honey Badgers group, which we built, you say you could build it for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, and it ended up being a season. Right. So at some point, talking about booking another client wasn't all that interesting. And if I needed help on some specific element, I had a relationship with those 12 people and I knew who to call, who was an expert at the different elements. So it was an amazing experience. Like, it helped us all get better. I mean, Mark O'Donnell was in the group, Jill Young was in the group, CJ Dubé was in the group. You know, all these leaders, everyone's pretty much an expert who was in that group at this point. So it was a great experience.
Wow, yeah. That's a common theme that as we have gone through and had conversations both on this show and out and about is that both longing for if they're not a part of that or if they have experienced that community in some form or fashion, just the value of that, of being able to have that resource even from a text or whatever format you wanna go in where it doesn't involve a formalized thing, but I can go to somebody and ask if I've got an issue on a lunch break, and I can go in and reach out to my community and tap in and get their advice on things. I think that's so valuable for whatever stage you're in your coaching practice, whether you're first starting or you've had success and have 1,500 sessions or whatnot, but the value of that community is a common thing that continues to come up.
Yeah, we ran ours in WhatsApp. So it was very simple. We ran it in WhatsApp. We met once a quarter when we met at our quarterly collaborative exchange. And that's how we did it. So I can remember Walt Brown just going, 2 hours of windshield time. And that meant you're supposed to call Walt if you're free. And I can remember having a really challenging session one day and I was just getting crushed. And, I said, hey, 911, who's available? And Walt jumped on the phone and helped me through that process. Even I just had a Vistage talk at Cheer World in January in Orlando, and there were some challenges in the talk. Chris White, who had been part of the Honey Badgers, happened to be in the room. So during the talk, I just went and talked to him and still used my Honey Badger relationship to help me stay in the game. So it was fabulous.
So, transitioning more into offering, which we believe is another core part of building a practice. You gotta know what your offering is. You gotta understand how you differentiate yourself. So, you have talked a little bit about the importance of being able to find the right fit clients, right? The right fit CEOs that you want to work with. Can you talk a little bit about your process of how you go about that to find those right fit clients?
Yeah. So there's this challenge where, from a business development standpoint, you're like, "Ooh, there's a client. I should go close it." Sort of like going hunting. And are you big game hunting for a trophy or are you just hunting?
Hmm.
So I tend to do more trophy hunting at this point than just hunting to feed the family. And what I will find is that if I talk to someone in a warm call or I do a 90-minute meeting, I'm actually looking to see if I want, because I'm gonna have to spend 2 years with this person. So, or this group. Do I actually want to spend 2 years with them? Am I going to look forward to that? And so that's how I work the process. And literally, I was just talking to someone who ended up having a bad session with the wrong fit client.
Hmm.
And so my filter is as follows. I look to see, and I mostly subconsciously do this at this point, but are they target market? Do they have the right amount of revenue? Are they growth oriented? Are they open minded? Are they willing to learn? Are they appreciative, respectful, frustrated, and want help? And do I like the business they're in? Like, did their core values match with me? Then I want to know, 'cause so this is a Joe Polish concept. And the concept is, are they going to be easy, lucrative, and fun to work with, or hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating? Okay. So I've literally said, this sounds hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating in a meeting, and just say, this is not for me, which I would not have done in the beginning. And anything I could close, I would try to close. And then, we generally are going to look for, um, this is a Rich Litvin concept. Like, I want a hell yes
Hmm.
or a hell no, because in the middle, I'm in hell. Oh, can you call 3 months? Like, no, not you. Why don't you call me in 3 months if you decided? That's not an arrogant thing. It's really like, look, I just clients who are hell yes, because it makes everything easier. It's not easy to implement these systems and do the change management. So we want committed clients. So as an example, I had a 90-minute meeting this week and the visionary showed up 15 minutes late. I'd call that a black swan. That was sort of a passive aggressive move to say, like, this is not important to me.
Mhm,
At that point, I basically said, I don't really want to work with them. I'll finish the process. Had a call with the person who had introduced me to the opportunity, who was on the leadership team after. He said, I'm so sorry. He was late or was checked out during the meeting. And I said to him, it's not a problem. That was my gift to you
mm,
because it's a help first gift. I just showed you what you're dealing with. He's not in enough pain at this point
mm,
and not open minded, appreciative, frustrated, respectful. So that doesn't really work for me. So it's okay. Like I didn't leave feeling like I hadn't done my job. Sometimes the job of EOS is just to point out the black swan and move on because I'm not going to be able to change that business unless that visionary is a hell yes.
mm. That probably took a bit of a journey in your coaching career to get to that point where you are able to have the confidence to both see that and be able to redirect that in a positive way to them of, hey, this isn't going to work for me, but here is the black swan, the lesson, if you will. Can you talk a little bit about just that journey that it took to get to that point? Obviously it was over time, but I mean, I think of a new business coach because it resonated with me when you said, you see a client and you're going out and you're just hunting just to get a deer to feed the family, right? You're not going after the 10 pointer or whatever. You so there's a mindset shift that has to happen, right? Can you talk how that you came to that conclusion?
Lots of pain. So, and I would say you have to have cash confidence
Hmm,
in order to be in that. So it starts with Dan Sullivan talks about cash confidence. So if you don't have cash confidence, it's very, very difficult to put yourself in that mindset. Number
right.
one, as a business developer, it's very hard not to just say, "Oh, I can close that deal. I might as well close that deal," because it's hard to dial that back when you realize that actually being in session with that group is not gonna be enjoyable to me. It's not gonna be enjoyable to me, and it's gonna impact my confidence. So I don't wanna be in a room with a group that's not appreciative and respectful and saying, "Wow, we did amazing things," and are only gonna pick on what didn't get accomplished. So it's cash confidence, and then it's having the discipline to say to run through the target market analysis, like I had I always have an apprentice every year, so one of my apprentices who's now an expert EOS implementer came to me and said, "Gosh, I have this client and they just fired me and I'm really upset about it and we didn't have a good session." And I'm like, "All right, did you walk through the target market analysis? Did you actually want the client?" He's like, "Well, I didn't want the client." So then what's the issue? Is it an ego issue that you're upset that they fired you and you didn't fire them? Stop taking money when you don't want to be in the room. They can smell it, you can smell it. And if you can't help them, either give them to someone else or let them go figure out what they need.
That really ties into a lot of the Black Swan Group and the negotiation training that you have, I'm sure. I'm sure that helped you scale that up. But can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe not necessarily from a business development standpoint, because it sounds like it comes up with that. So, but really how that training and working with Chris and the concepts in that have helped you become a better coach in the session room?
I'm just super grateful to have earned the skills, learned the skills and earned the skills because being able to implement tactical empathy is like learning a second language. The only way you can do it is by doing language immersion. So I've spent, I don't know, I started working with Chris in 2016. So since 2016, I've been working on it and been around them. And it impacts all aspects of my practice from business development to facilitating a session to, someone wants to, even the hard conversation, like with the client who or the prospect who said, "I'm so sorry," and I'm like, "I made it about them and not about me." I'm like, "That was a gift to you from me." And we say anytime I want or I need is in your head, you're in a negotiation. So you're in a negotiation frequently. And so what I've found is that because I'm in in the Black Swan techniques, I I'm able to they just come out because I can use my supercomputer, the supercomputer being your subconscious. So the conscious can process 40 bits of information a second, and the subconscious can process 20 million bits of information a second. And so what happens is I just can be in these conversations and be really calm and comfortable. I laugh. I'm like, oh, I just had a tough one. And my Apple Watch still said it was 60 beats a minute. It didn't even move.
Hmm.
And then, the interesting thing and going back to optimize for growth is that tough 90-minute meeting I had this week. I actually had Derek, who's the head coach at Black Swan, sort of debrief with me after that because the prospect asked me, "Why didn't you go harder at the issue while and use the Black Swan skills while you were in the 90-minute meeting?" And I said, "That wasn't we use the skills for for you, not for us, not against you, meaning like only for good and not for evil. Like
Hmm.
I don't need to use the skills to call someone out on the carpet. I don't think that was a place to do it. If we were going to have that conversation, I would have had it in private with the individual who I didn't feel was committed to the process."
Yeah, that's a fascinating model. I read through that book. It was, I finished it. It was during deer season because I finished it in the deer stand, which is, it's funny. I just remember sitting there. It's a very slow day. But the concepts, I mean, it applies obviously the stories that Chris shares of high stakes are just fascinating to keep it, but there are so many things, and I love how you point that out, where we're negotiating constantly. I mean, I have a toddler, so I am negotiating all the time. It feels like. And so, but you start to see that, and the skill sets that you can gain from that are just invaluable in whatever profession you find. But you're working with Chris on another iteration of things, right? Is that correct? There's something coming out here soon, right?
So September 2025, the book is going to be called Fight Less, Win More. And it's the equivalent, it's the missing manual for Never Split the Difference, where you call it out perfectly for me. Chris's stories are amazing from around the world, but all high stakes, really interesting, but maybe a little intimidating for people. So our idea is to create this book, which is the equivalent of what the heck is EOS, like a primer to go with Never Split the Difference. So really excited about that opportunity. I'm writing it with Derek Gaunt, who's the head coach at Black Swan, who I talked about, and it's been a journey. It's amazing.
I can't wait to dive into that. That's going to be awesome. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing just so much wisdom of how you've grown and scaled your practice and how you've leveled up through a variety of different coaches and mastery skill sets. So I appreciate you sharing the wisdom that you had. I always like to ask guests on the tail end, if you were going back with all the knowledge and experience that you've gained over countless sessions, all sorts of conversations with mentors and coaches, what advice would you give rookie JBS starting out?
I guess I would give two pieces of advice. One is it's a journey. It goes a lot slower than you would think. So we didn't raise venture capital to go build this business. But the joke is the venture capitalists are in like the cigarette boat pouring gasoline directly into the or jet fuel directly to the carburetor, if we had a carburetor these days. And what you're in is a little rowboat, and you have to you literally have to every day get in that rowboat and continue rowing forward. So you have to just stick to it and be patient. It doesn't go as fast as you like. I thought I was gonna quit like 5 times in the first year, and my brother Tyler kept telling me, "You're not gonna quit. Just go do the work." I said it was 240 coffees and no clients. Um, the second piece that I would say is that sometimes people think if you got a bad score, so a bad score, if it's on a scale of 1 to 10 and someone scored it a 5, that means you didn't do a good job.
Mm,
Only you know if you did a good job or did your best in session that day. If someone got fired in session and they just don't realize it, so that's my joke. You got fired in session, but you just didn't realize it and they gave you a 5 or they gave the meeting a 5, you would have given it a 5 too if you got fired. So, I actually think lower scores actually are reflective of us entering the danger like Chris Schneider talks about, as opposed to, a vanity score of 10 all the time. That means you didn't go hard enough.
mm. That's that's good. That's, such a valuable. I remember when we went through and rated sessions, I was the overly optimistic guy and was always, 9, 10, yeah, we're good. And then I started over the side to get a little bit, okay, did we go in and set and accomplish what we needed to, and started to be a little bit harder? Because I think there's value in it's an 8 and here's why. And we made good progress, but this is a big roadblock. So it's a great perspective to have. And then the other question that I always like to ask is, what is a lesson you're in the middle of learning right now in this current moment?
So the lesson I'm learning is how to build a personal brand because people want to hear personal stories. They don't want to hear necessarily about a company. So if you look at what does well on social media, it's individual humans who happen to be part of a company as opposed to the story about the company. So I'm working on personal branding. It's amazing. Chris Voss today has over 1 million social followers, and the power of having 1 million social followers is really really amazing. And then I'm learning how to go do keynote speaking because with the book, I'm going to need to be able to go do keynote speaking. So I'm working on storytelling and learning to be a better speaker.
Well, I am excited to see how all that comes into fruition. So, thank you again for coming on. If someone wants to get in touch with you about a variety of things, maybe they want to learn more about the book, maybe more negotiation training, learn more about you, have questions about building a practice, how can people get in touch with you?
So my website is Stay Curious JBS, like you said in the beginning. That's my handle, JBS. Julie at Bravo Sierra. So staycuriousjbs.com is how to get in touch with me.
Love it. Well, thank you again for coming on. We hope this was beneficial to you. I know it was to me having this conversation. I look up to JBS and have learned a lot from him over the years. And so stay curious, like he says. I love that mantra. I think that's such a great summary of what it means to be a good business coach. That's it for today's episode of the Ambitious Coach Podcast. My hope is that something here helps you sharpen your craft and keep building a coaching practice you're proud of. Before we wrap, a quick thank you to our sponsor, 90. If you're coaching leadership teams, having your clients run their entire world in 90 truly elevates your work. Vision, rocks, scorecards, issues, it all lives in one centralized place. The clarity keeps your clients aligned between sessions and makes every conversation you have with them more focused and more impactful. I've used 90 with over 500 leadership teams, and I can tell you it makes great companies better and great coaches even more effective. Feel free to use promo code AC20 for 20% off. Again, that's AC20 for 20% off. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I'm Cam, cheering you on as you grow your ambitious coaching practice. We'll see you next time.